Dr. Susan Jasko, you might have heard her speak. She's done now several presentations here. She's a professor in the Department of Communication Studies at the California University of Pennsylvania. She is an expert in communication theory, public speaking, and media. So she's going to be examining social media, the implications, and she has a very nice perspective, and she has chosen not to do a PowerPoint.
Thank you. So now you get to stare at my name and affiliation for the whole time I'm talking, which won't be for too terribly long. But actually, as I was listening to Brian describe the process that the Weather Channel went through and then the sort of how that all fell out, I decided rather than talk about social media, I hope you'll forgive me since there are no PowerPoint slides so you won't be confused, by the fact that I'm going to change the focus a little bit of what I want to say. And I'm, as you know, not a meteorologist, so I'm not going to be commenting on terms of I'm in no position to do so about the sort of the technical issues and the whatever it is, the low whatever it is you're all talking about there. So I'm not going to do that. So that's what you sound like, by the way, to the rest of us. So I'm not going to attempt to do that. But rather, I guess I'm going to do what I tried to do on the other evening, and that is to say a few things and then raise some questions for you, so that we can all start really discussing these things, however you all want that conversation to go. So one thing I want to say is introduce you to a guy from my discipline and not from my discipline. He's unfortunately no longer with us, but he started a program at New York University at NYU called Media Ecology. His name is Neil Postman, P-O-S-T-M-A-N. You should look him up. If you don't know him, you will find him, those of you in the media in particular, will find him really fascinating if you're unfamiliar with his work. And I encourage you to go and read his actual work. The reason I say that is one of the things Neil prided himself on, and he trained his graduate students to do, was to communicate in plain language to other people, particularly when speaking in public, right? And so that he felt strongly that there was too much use of technical language and academies going on, and that just merely clouded any effort at communication. We certainly can see the wisdom of that. So he's, among the many things he's famous for, he gave a presentation near the end of his career in life, and it was called something like the 7 important questions to ask about any new technology or media. And I'm going to broaden that idea of technology and media. I could go back to the Greek, but I'll spare you the discussion about the epistemology of the word there. So we won't go down that road, but I will say that an idea, a concept, a name, could be considered a technology by his thinking. And so he asked 7 questions. I'm not going to go through 7 questions. Don't panic. But I will say that the questions that he raises, the first one is this, of any new sort of invention, and again, using that term very broadly. What problem currently exists to which this technology will be the solution? It's another way, and he asked 6 more questions along those lines. To me, it boils down to, because we can do a thing, should we do a thing? There's a sort of imperative in our culture at the technology end, right, to race forward no matter what. And we only are beginning to look back or look to the side as we do it and think, what have we created here? Like, what's going to be the collateral circumstances there? So I would ask you to consider that as a part of this broad discussion here. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit here. So if you don't know this, here's a piece of naming trivia for you from the Academy. So linguists know about this, and the neurolinguists who study this sort of thing. It's this really interesting phenomenon about names in particular. And it works like this. You know, you're in a reception in the next room over, and it gets really loud. There's all that buzz going on, and people are talking, and glasses are clinking, or whatever it is y'all doing with your glasses. And then you're in a conversation with a person or several people, and then, a few yards away across the room, somebody says your name. And you could not, until that moment, have heard another word in that room, but the minute your name is spoken, this is a really well-established phenomenon, your entire attention refocuses. For your name, not for other people's names, right? And so there's a power to naming. Right? There's a social power, there is a psychological power, there is a power to naming. And I suspect that some of the controversy over naming, I don't know for sure because we haven't been at this long enough to know, but I suspect that some of the controversy, if you will, or the tensions are about an issue of the power involved in naming. And then, of course, the social question about that is who gets to name, right? Who gets to make the decisions? So we've heard a nice discussion, a nice presentation about that already from Brian, about how that all played out in a particular way. So here's a question I would ask, and Brian, maybe you can address this once we go to the discussion, and that is, so you called it a great success, and your description certainly portrayed a lot of ways in which it was successful, but I would ask, by what metric are we then measuring success in this case? At this conference, we've heard an awful lot about issues of communicating clearly and effectively with our various audiences, and I want to emphasize the plural on the end of that, audiences, right? There's no homogeneous audience anymore. If there ever was one, it was probably just an artifact created by mass communication technologies, right? There appeared to be a mass audience or a homogeneous audience. There isn't, right? And so, sorry, my earring got caught. Would you mind if I just stop for a moment to do this? Because it's very distracting to me.
All the time.
These are not problems meteorologists have every day, aren't they? So, I apologize, but it's really going to bug me if I could hear. Thank you, darling. Thank you. Okay, so now I have one earring on, which feels even worse. All right, so thank you, sweetie. Okay, hold the scarf, would you? Thanks. Okay, so clearly, we had evil PowerPoint earlier, now we have an evil scarf. Okay, so I would ask this question in this context then, right, that we've been talking about the efforts to communicate, to be clear, how much do people understand, what do they need to understand, who needs to understand it when, right? So when we talk about success in this way, what are we measuring for success? Right? So on the one hand, we might be measuring, we might ask the question, or a question like this, does the naming of winter storms enhance the efficacy of the message and the message intent in terms of the publics that we're trying to reach with this? And if so, how, or how would we go about ascertaining that or measuring that? That's the social scientist in me talking, right? But we might also ask, are we also measuring, or are we primarily measuring, or are we after the fact thinking about success in terms of the media positioning that naming a storm allows, which goes back to my earlier statements the other night, right, about weather and weather information as a kind of media commodity, right? Now, those two things are not necessarily mutually exclusive. I'm not sure how they overlap. I don't have the answers to these questions. By the way, I raised the questions. That's my job right here today. So, but I wonder, right, so, oh my God, I didn't put my other earring in yet. And so I wonder, I'm so sorry. I'm not saying they're exclusive, but I'm saying that there might be a kind of natural tension between those two different kinds of successes, or those two kinds of functionings, or those two kinds of goals. And I think that's worth thinking about and examining in a more particular way. So I would say, why do we name any storm? And we've talked about that a little bit, and I'm sure y'all can address that in a more detailed way than I can at this point in time. I will note, on the other hand, right, from a communication, a rhetorical point of view, the personification of information is a standard rhetorical strategy that we teach students, right, who are learning public speaking for the first time, as a way to more effectively communicate and have your audience emotionally attached to and therefore understand information. Now, I worry a little bit, right, as somebody sort of a media critic in a sense, or an observer of media, I should say. I don't mean that in the negative sense of critic, right? But the images you were showing that were lovely from Time Magazine and stuff, I remember those being up there, that take the idea of the Nemo name and really make fun of it, if you will, and have fun with it in the media. But then I wonder about what are the collateral consequences of that, right, for people's perception and understanding about real risk and danger and preparations and resilience and all of those kinds of things we've talked about. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think it's worth asking that particular question, right? One of the things really interesting to me as a communication person and a researcher is that you talked about how it was that one medium, right, Twitter, and its limitations and characteristics became the driving force into other media forms. Right, so it was the hashtag issue that generates in the end, or becomes the whole moving force, right? So, Twitter made us name the storm Nemo, right, is what that boils down to, right? So that's a little weird, right? That's worth thinking about too, right? The kind of internal media echo chamber effects, right, of the changes that are being caused as a consequence of our media technologies changing. So I think, actually, I'm going to stop there and open up the floor for questions. Thanks.